Hey everyone! Today we're joined by Paul Puey, who is the co-founder and CEO of AirBitz. Thank you very much for joining us today, Paul.
Hey guys, pleasure being on the show. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, talk to us a little bit about AirBitz. What inspired you to sort of get into Bitcoin and ultimately choose to start a Bitcoin wallet company?
Oh, let's see. How much time do you guys have? Well, let's see. Entry into Bitcoin just came actually from me working both in technology about over a decade ago, and then actually transitioning into small business. I'd worked and did everything from running a restaurant, bar, nightclub, and running a climbing gym and doing outdoor guiding, but still always being the technology guy at those companies and seeing the I was kind of that guy behind the counter getting screwed with chargebacks of credit cards, and seeing the merchant consumer interface of technology being really, really poor and nascent. And then having learned about Bitcoin, instantly got fascinated. It took me about 2 weeks of research to realize that this was it. And from day one, I bought some Bitcoin and tried to use it. And as soon as I tried to use it, I saw, oh my gosh, this is even worse than the current infrastructure for consumer and merchant and people paying each other. And it didn't seem like it was a problem that could not be solved. And seeing the pain points and seeing what we could do based on the technology we had, I said this is a huge opening. And unlike the current ecosystem of payments that was really riddled with a ton of different companies trying to get into space, this one was fairly young and nascent, and so it was a great opportunity to get into the space. And so really it's trying to ease the pain points of a Bitcoin user, as a person who actually tried to use Bitcoin from day one.
Yeah, so would it be fair to say then that the AirBitz wallet is differentiated by its user experience? How do you separate yourself from all the other wallets out there?
So there is an aspect of user experience that we have an incredible focus on. So we do take it from a very high level, like the user experience, the UI, fluidity, but at the same time we feel that too many companies or implementations and projects compromise on core Bitcoin fundamentals of decentralization, privacy, autonomy in the mission to accomplish that user experience, where we've taken it and said, no way, we're not going to compromise on that. We want a decentralized wallet. We think that that's what made Bitcoin fundamentally successful to begin with, as opposed to all of the other digital currencies before it, and that's what will make wallets and other projects successful going forward within the Bitcoin space, is whether or not they can retain that decentralization, that fault tolerance, and scalability that was key to Bitcoin. So yes, you're right. We are focusing on user experience, but we're trying to deliver good user experience for a decentralized product, which I don't think anyone has really had that focus on before.
So Paul, what kind of growth have you seen in response to AirBitz as a wallet? And do you see any challenges sort of with consumers kind of pitching the benefits of decentralization to them?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that we run into is that people don't realize what we do under the covers. It's almost like our user experience hides a lot of our core values. And that was somewhat intentional, but also, we're realizing that it's more of a challenge than we expected. So we wanted to deliver both, and I think we've actually delivered both, but people don't see that. So the people that are the true, not necessarily the crypto anarchists, but the uber privacy freaks, they see what we've built and it looks like a hosted wallet. And so they think that we're a hosted wallet, even though we give, in many aspects, privacy above and beyond the very kind of engineer-like wallets that are out there, the technical wallets that are out there. We almost surpass them in privacy in some respects. And so the challenge is the communication. Like, yes, here's something that grandma can use, but deliver the decentralized privacy that the other people care about. And so we've had to communicate that very carefully with people and say, actually, no, this is what happens in the wallet. No, actually, this is what happens in the wallet. And then once we get that communication out there, people start opening their eyes, like, oh my God, really? You guys do that underneath the covers? And yes, you're open source, so if you are technical enough or are rich enough to hire someone to audit the code, then yes, you'll see that that is exactly what we're building.
One of my favorite features of AirBitz is the ability to see what places near you accept Bitcoin. What basically spurred that to be a feature? Was this an idea where you were maybe looking for a place to spend Bitcoin and you were like, well, what places are nearby? So you used one of the maps and you realized this is inefficient? Or was it just something that seemed easy to embed in the app? Basically, what was the genesis of that thinking?
Well, ironically, the genesis of that thinking was legacy mobile wallets. If any of you have ever used the PayPal wallet or the Square wallet or Level Up or Mogul, they are mobile wallets, but being somewhat nascent mobile wallets, you need to know where you can use that wallet. So in the same sense, we've built a merchant directory into the wallet so you know where you can use a Bitcoin wallet, and it's not tied specifically to any AirBitz merchants, because that doesn't really exist. I mean, you could use it lists every single merchant, BitPay and any other merchant processor, or people just using a wallet to take Bitcoin. So that was actually the inspiration behind it, in addition to me trying to use Bitcoin and realizing that it was really hard to find places. And this is a problem that's been solved. We've built directories in the past for every niche market, and there's no reason why we couldn't do it for Bitcoin in a good, seamless, easy-to-use manner. And luckily, two of my co-founders had came off a prior startup, and they had actually built a merchant directory as well, so they had the skill sets necessary to get that up to speed. And blending the two questions that were just asked of me, like, what are the challenges you face, and why did you build this merchant directory? We built a merchant directory because it was, for us, fairly simple and easy to do. But one of the challenges we face is that people think we're a merchant directory company, and they think that that is our core focus and not the wallet, and the wallet is a side project, when it couldn't be any more opposite. We actually spend about 90% of our time on the wallet, and the technology that goes underneath the wallet is our core focus. The merchant directory is effectively a side project, and it's a feature of our wallet. We want to give early adopters and evangelists the perfect tool to onboard people with Bitcoin. In one app, you can send and receive Bitcoin that's easy to secure, that's familiar to secure, and at the same time, you could show someone that this is a real economy, there's a real currency that is usable in many, many different countries and different places.
I'm absolutely impressed by Airbitzs. Every time I update the app, I see there are significant improvements in every update, not just small UX changes, significant technological changes. Were there any projects you looked at when you got started to sort of inspire the sort of work you're doing and that you really modeled Airbitzs after, or modeled at least your values after?
Yeah, so we were, if you know anything about our data model, the data model of Airbitz is trying to be decentralized but try to be familiar. So we create private keys, private seeds on the device of the user. So the user has 100% control of their funds. We encrypt them on their device, and then we back up and synchronize them across their different devices. So many people might say, that sounds pretty familiar to the blockchain.info. And so to some degree, there was a little bit of inspiration from that, but that's about the end of the inspiration. After that, we've then actually gone and underneath the covers significantly overhauled how the data is synchronized, how the data is encrypted, how it's associated with users and whatnot, and how users access it. We've built in the familiarity of a username and password. We've built in the ability to do password recovery, and we're soon launching two-factor that is so easy anybody can use it. I'd love to talk about that if you guys have any interest in time, because I think this is going to be a game changer, because I think it's a critical security feature that many people disregard because it's kind of complex. I know I hate it, but I know how valuable it is. So a little bit of inspiration came from wallets like a blockchain, but at the same time, inspiration from other wallets that retain that level of decentralization, where you access the Bitcoin network directly and you don't require, a single entity.
So what you just said is really intriguing. So you're talking about two-factor auth. Two-factor auth is something that a lot of security experts really recommend to everybody. Mm-hmm. The challenge being that it's actually kind of difficult to set up. A lot of times, the preferred user experience is to send something over SMS or text messages, which is insecure, right?
Yep,
so
exactly.
What is the approach that you're taking, and what is this new feature that you're adding to the wallet?
So we're calling it one-touch two-factor, or one-touch two-factor authentication. Basically, we are only a mobile wallet, and I would say over 99% of people that actually utilize two-factor utilize it on a mobile device. So for the most part, the app is living in the same space as the two-factor authentication app. So we asked ourselves, well, why should it be two different apps? Why not just put them together into one single application? So I'm not bouncing from Airbitz to Google Authenticator, or Airbitz to Authy, or Airbitz to my text messaging app, and then copying and pasting 6 digits into my wallet. Just fold them together. So we've effectively done that, and we'll be launching that pretty soon, where you literally just go into settings and turn it on, and that's it. You never do anything else after that. And effectively, that generates the two-factor seed. For those of you that are technical and understand how two-factor works, for at least the Google Authenticator model, it creates the two-factor seed, shares it with the server, and from then on out, it actually does the hash with the time, that little 30-second window that you have, and sends that to the server to authenticate. And that thereby locks your account to the devices that have that two-factor seed. So if someone across the world happened to gain your login and password, they don't have that seed, they can't log into your account. And so we've enabled two-factor without you ever having to do anything to utilize it other than just turning it on. And I'm using this now on my device, and I'm like, this is great. I forget that I even have it on. It's so seamless that I'm blown away that no one's really done it before.
I have a quick question. This is actually my first introduction to AirBitz. I'm curious, like, how is the? Can you describe a little bit how this is decentralized? Like, I guess it's just a local mobile app. Is it like a light node, or how does that work?
So you're referring to just AirBitz as a whole, not necessarily the two-factor aspect of it?
Yes.
Like how is it decentralized?
Yeah.
So we accomplished, I think, almost a tier of centralization versus decentralization. So the aspect of, I'll start from where it's most not decentralized and where we had to compromise. So where it's not decentralized is that there is a central server, standard SQL web app database that holds users' hashed logins and passwords, and that is how users authenticate and how they create an account. And so we can verify that that login hasn't been taken by some other user. So there's that one decentralized centralized database. And creating wallets, creating accounts goes through there. Now there's a peer-to-peer distributed storage, which actually utilizes Git. Most of you are fairly technical, so Git is actually a peer-to-peer protocol. Many of us utilize it in a very client-server manner, like such as utilizing GitHub. But what many people don't realize is it's actually very, very peer-to-peer. There are no servers, there are no clients. So we host a handful of Git nodes, in our own network. So we host all of the nodes, and it works similar to a blockchain in that someone pushes some encrypted data to these nodes, and the nodes push it into all the other nodes. So any of the nodes can be down, and your wallet can simply access a different node on the network. So that's a peer-to-peer, somewhat decentralized, except that we host the node, so it's partially decentralized. And then where it's most decentralized is the fact that the app can access the Bitcoin network without AirBitz. So we utilize libbitcoin servers and also a few other, all those centralized APIs. We don't rely on any one of them. So unlike wallets that, even though you own the private keys, the wallet requires you to access the network through one company, through one API. We don't require that at all. And even if AirBitz went down as a company and our servers went down, the wallet can still access the network. You can actually log in using a username and password on your phone, and it decrypts the data that's on your phone, and then you can send out your money. You can even log in airplane mode just to prove that you don't actually need our servers to log in. So our PIN login, which is convenient for people, that unfortunately does need a server, but you can always do a full username and password to log in without any servers at all. So it's a tier of decentralization. We think we've made a great compromise between, what's most important with respect to decentralization and what's a little bit less important. And there's a lot of functionality that can still work, even if AirBitz partially goes down or fully goes down. And I think we've made a good compromise.
Okay, so that's interesting the way you're using Git. And is that it sounds like the Git nodes are just set up by AirBitz. Is that right?
Right now, they are just set up by AirBitz. We're going to be open sourcing those server protocols, and really, it's literally just running a Git node and a light web app on top of it that helps communicate between the different nodes. And if you're familiar with Git, there's a thing called a commit hook. So it's a script or a program that can get triggered as soon as a node receives a commit. And we utilize that functionality of Git to push the data to other servers. So the nodes know the servers, and they can actually push about releasing a lightweight app that people can run on their computer and be a node for themselves. So that way your phone can say, okay, well, there's a node that I know about. I'm at my house. I can push to this node, which is my own personal backup of my stuff, in addition to pushing to AirBitz nodes. So it's something that we can do because our architecture can support it, which many other wallet architectures would be hard-pressed to be able to implement inside of their system.
That's interesting. So it's like, and how demanding, how computationally demanding is that? Like running a Git node? I imagine probably not very bad.
Not at all. It's barely a resource at all. And the nice thing is because it is peer-to-peer, any number of them can go down. As long as we have one node up, you can still synchronize between your different devices. And really, that's not even that critical for your phone because your phone can still send and receive without the nodes. The only thing that gets synchronized is the metadata. The private keys have already been synchronized before you can even receive money. That's guaranteed. And then only the metadata on a regular basis gets synchronized between your devices. So it's not that demanding at all. The nice thing is Git is incredibly efficient. It knows when data has already been pushed to it, and so it doesn't actually push any additional data. And we can still make it much more efficient. Right now it's heavyweight with respect to making connections and connect and deconnect. But we have plans for the future to make the connections a little bit more persistent, and you can subscribe to updates versus sitting there and polling. But right now it actually works pretty elegantly.
So one of the things you talked about where you first made some compromises is this sort of username and password store. That strikes me as something that it seems like you're architecting the entire Airbitz stack in a way that once a good solution can be found, that it can be decentralized. Give me some of your thoughts on maybe like the future direction on how like a fully decentralized wallet or even Airbitz in specific might work.
Actually, we thought about the idea of the wallet. One of the inspirations, I should rewind a little bit, was actually BitTorrent Sync. I don't know how many people are familiar with BitTorrent Sync, but with one long random key, you can basically synchronize between arbitrary number of devices, even poke through NAT firewalls. And we'd originally thought of that and said to ourselves, well, we can create a wallet on a phone, create this sync key, and anytime you put that sync key on another device, you basically synchronize the data. So that was our original idea, and we realized that there were some headaches in being able to determine collisions between usernames and passwords, which was the ease of use that people almost demanded. And we had started to think of other alternatives, and one of the big alternatives that came across our plate was MadeSafe. And as soon as I heard MadeSafe launch, I actually flew to the Austin, Texas Bitcoin conference, and I was able to get 4 hours with David Irvin and Nick and chatted with them about the architecture, and I was very excited about it. It is basically username, password focused, and it's decentralized storage. So it was a great fit, except that it just was too early. It wasn't necessary. It didn't look like it was going to be ready by the time we were ready to launch. And so we had to kind of devise something on our own, and hence this idea of Git. And the nice thing is because we didn't compromise and decided to just put it on a database, we feel like we can shoehorn in a different decentralized storage in its place should something come around in the future. So we're ready for it if it comes around, but in the meantime, we've got a solution that I think encompasses a high enough level of decentralization where, yes, you can't create a new account if our centralized server goes down. You can't create a new wallet, but you can still send and receive. And at least we can also peer-to-peer backup people's data so that it can synchronize between devices, and that becomes much more fault tolerant than if we just had a central server. So that still excites us, and we think we've gone 90+% there, and we'll still try to get to that 100% as the technology evolves.
That's really exciting to hear. We're all real big fans of actual true decentralization, but we also recognize the market readiness in a lot of cases just isn't there, and the technologies haven't been tested. One of the other areas of decentralization that is really interesting, and you and I have talked about this in the past, which is the identity problem, right? So payment protocol has the the X509 certificates kind of baked in, which has a very deep level of centralization that's sort of forced upon people to use payment protocol. Talk a little bit about Airbitz's perspective on this and what you guys would like to see in the future.
Really, I think as soon as we find a good, well-adopted, or even not well-adopted, just like early adopted, where we can kind of drive its adoption, protocol that decentralizes identity management, whether it be on like a Namecoin, a sidechain, or even preferably baked into the Bitcoin protocol itself. That's something, and that replacing X509, then we'd be very excited about utilizing that onto payment protocol and any other tool that needs some aspect of identity management. And I'm hesitant to say the word identity management because for all of those identity privacy freaks out there, they start saying, "Oh my God, I don't want to give up my identity." Well, when I say identity, it's just simply even a handle that can identify this machine or this public address as being owned by this handle, which is established, whether or not there's any person or company behind that handle. And so being able to make that attachment has an incredible amount of value. But whatever that system is that comes about, it would be nice if there wasn't a central authority behind it, such as the way we use DNS today. An aspect also of the protocol, which I'm hoping that we could resolve going forward, and it's one of those where this will depend on the way Bitcoin goes going forward, whether or not we end up using payment channels and being able to pay offline. But having traveled the world and you try to use Bitcoin as much as possible, I find that internet connectivity and the ability to use Bitcoin right now go very hand in hand, but they don't necessarily need to. I've chatted a lot with people on Reddit that were very excited about the ability to send a signed transaction over Bluetooth to a merchant, and that merchant being the one that broadcasts the transaction. And that can be doable today using kind of the standard QR codes and NFC. That becomes a bit more of a challenge as soon as payment protocol starts coming into play. Even if we did have decentralized identity management, we'd still be tied to being able to make this HTTP request over to a server and determining, what is the actual address, is this person who they are. If we can solve that problem of identity management in a way that the sender doesn't absolutely need to have internet connectivity, then I think we have the potential to really broaden the adoptability of Bitcoin. Because just me, as someone with an actual smartphone, traveling to even developed countries like Australia and New Zealand, struggle to use Bitcoin on a regular basis, even when I had a merchant that was taking it because of this issue. So that's kind of my take right now, but I think some aspect of the payment protocol can be very widely adopted with a few tweaks.
So Paul, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your experience kind of as a startup. You were recently admitted to the Plug and Play Accelerator. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience, how it's been helpful to your company, if it has, and what that's been like?
Oh man, it's been tremendously helpful, and we're excited to be at Plug and Play and working with Scott Robinson, who's the FinTech Bitcoin Accelerator Director over there. Ironically, we got in through the program, not through the Bitcoin or FinTech Accelerator. We had actually pitched at an event in San Diego, and Plug and Play has a presence in San Diego, looking for startups to recruit into the program. We pitched over there, got accepted amidst almost 1,000 applicants, and came in through Startup Camp. And in a way, the experience has been a blend of both being at Plug and Play and getting introduced to a lot of the names and faces, being part of their meetup program, because they let us have a strong presence whenever they host their meetup, which used to be once a week, now it's about once a month. And then also just getting introduced into the Bay Area scene, which is really huge. Being able to be part of the events that occur here in San Francisco. I think our second day at Plug and Play, we met someone who had a startup and loved Bitcoin, although he wasn't a Bitcoin startup, and let us know about a meetup that was happening in like 20 minutes. He goes, "Hey, are you guys going to the PayPal meetup in 20 minutes?" And I was like, we just got here. We didn't know about it. And so he said, "You should check it out. They're talking about Bitcoin." I'm like, sweet. So we packed our bags, headed over to this meetup, and through that we met the speaker, Lauren, at the meetup, and he was the one who was hosting the O'Reilly conference, which was here in San Francisco about a couple months ago. And we weren't sure if we were going to go. It was pretty expensive, and he gave our entire team free passes to the event. Since we're a startup and still early on, expensive to afford those passes. He invited us over, and through that we met a ton of people, a lot of great potential partnerships, a handful of investors who to this day we're still in contact with. And if it wasn't for that nice serendipitous moment from us being at Plug and Play and meeting the right person to send us to the right event, to our team being able to go to this and meet other people, it wouldn't have happened. So a big chain of events and things like that have been happening by being in the program and being here in the Bay Area that we're really grateful for. So it's been great. And they've also given us great advice, and we've tweaked our message, our pitch, how we tell people what we are. Our focus has definitely been refined, what we are doing and what we're going to deliver. And we have a big demo day coming up in a couple of weeks where we're going to be launching two-factor and another feature as well. So no, it's been a great experience by far.
Another follow-up I might have to that is sort of asking about your experience as an entrepreneur. If you feel comfortable with sharing with us, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes you've made as an entrepreneur or as a company, and how have you kind of come back from those?
Biggest mistakes are underestimating especially when you're an early company and people don't know exactly who you are or what you do, underestimating how hard it is to communicate your message if you do more than one thing. And that was our challenge, because we had launched as a merchant directory and actually gained quite a bit of traction as a merchant directory, and people liked what we built. And it almost overshadowed our wallet, and this is what I mentioned earlier. And I completely but underestimated how bad that miscommunication would be. And we'd gone to a meetup in our hometown of San Diego, and William, one of my co-founders, had even asked a handful of people, he goes, "Hey, do you know what Airbitzs does?" And he goes, "Yeah, you're a merchant directory." He goes, "Do you know we have a wallet?" And out of every 10 people he asked, I think less than 50% knew that we were a wallet, and the people that knew that we were a wallet thought we were a wallet that only worked with our merchant directory. And for the people that knew we were a general purpose wallet, they thought that it was a side project and that we didn't have a core focus on it. So that message and communicating what you do, even though you think you're doing a good job, is probably the thing that I definitely underestimated, and the need for that aspect of marketing, like the communications aspect of marketing, not marketing, putting ads, blah, 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 but really communicating your vision, what you do, how you're doing it, and why people should care has been the thing that I've definitely underestimated, that we are now really cranking on. Hence we go to these events and we talk and we do the podcast, and we want to hear feedback from people too. Like, what are the things that people think about when they first hear about our company and use our product. So incorporating that feedback has been really beneficial for us, but also one of the challenges that I think other entrepreneurs should be aware of is, what is your message? Make it simple, make it easy for people to understand, make it memorable.
Yeah, so you're talking about keeping a narrow focus when you're developing a business, and otherwise the message can get muddy. I think the larger conversation around Bitcoin is getting pretty confused, or has been pretty confused since the beginning, because there's so much disinformation and so many different aspects of it that it's very difficult to navigate as a newcomer to the space. What do you think are some of the solutions to reduce the complexity and make it easier for consumer adoption to actually happen?
Well, one thing, and someone had asked me one of my predictions for 2015, and I put BitPay on the spot, and I said that from a viewpoint of consumer adoption and merchant adoption, that BitPay would make those incredibly strong partnerships with the point-of-sale companies, where we're not running these little mobile apps on our phone to take Bitcoin as a payment, but instead it just is integrated in these systems that we're already using. So I think that's going to help drive this recognition as like, oh, it's just another payment method that's everywhere. And then, of course, we ourselves are working on bridging consumer adoption by making a wallet that's familiar to set up and familiar to use. And so, we're excited about NFC getting driven forward. So it's tap to pay like an Apple Pay, and there's nothing stopping Bitcoin from being as simple to use as Apple Pay, absolutely. And then the missing link from that is, how do you create and secure a wallet in a familiar way? And that's what we think we've solved in a pretty good way. It's like, oh, username, password, that's all I need. I can access it from any number of devices. It's backed up, it's secured. That's, I think, from a consumer spending wallet, we've solved that. One of the challenges is now when people are actually sinking a good amount of money into Bitcoin, I haven't seen yet what I'd consider to be a mass adoptable solution for large fund storage. People say, oh man, that Trezor is easy. It's easy for us, for the early adopters and people that care enough. It's not one that I think the masses would use, and same with like Ledger Wallet. They're great. They're getting simpler and simpler, but for mass storage, I don't think we've solved that yet. And paper wallets, to me, are not a solution for the masses. So that is still, I think, one of the missing things, is how do we secure large storage in a decentralized way that a lot of consumers can handle. And we have an idea of how to do that using multi-sig and still be as familiar as opening a bank account. But no one's done it yet, and it's still in our roadmap as opposed to being imminent to release.
So, in regards to wallets in general, who do you consider your biggest competition to be? When you're saying, okay, we want market share of this specific, of wallets in general, who are the leaders in the field, and who are you really going after?
Well, the biggest challenge when we start talking about Airbitzs is people, number one, don't see the value, at least a good handful of people that we come across don't see the value, number one, in just a decentralized wallet, one where people own their private keys. So our first battle is just communicating that. And what is the value of owning your private keys? And people think that when I say that I'm an ideologist and that's it, and that I only care about that from an ideology point of view. And that is partially true, but I actually care about it from a usability point of view as well, because I think hosted wallets provide a very poor user experience when you actually try to spend funds. And I've hit this, and many of my friends have hit this, and all of our co-founders have hit this when trying to use a hosted wallet to send money. It can't reliably send money because of the aggregation of people's funds and so much of it being in cold storage. So the first challenge we have is, and the first level of competition is effectively the hosted wallets. Now, once people have decided, okay, well, I believe in being able to hold my keys, then the landscape is, well, blockchain.info is definitely in the public eye and public mind. They're the ones that come up when you do a search for a Bitcoin wallet. You see blockchain.info. So they're a huge name in the space, and I give them a lot of respect for coming up with a good wallet at the time that they came up. And of course, there's other wallets. There's Mycelium, there's Bread Wallet, Green Address, and whatnot. And so a lot of those, I think, are still what I'd call the Bitcoin early adopter style wallet. They don't have the familiarity needed for the masses, but they at least uphold the values that we care about. And so I'd rather someone be using that than a hosted wallet.
So Paul, what is your world domination plan? What is your 10-year or 20-year plan for Airbitz? What do you see as sort of big in the future for you?
Got it. So long term, we definitely want to be one of the top 3 mobile wallets, and I think we're aiming to achieve that, obviously through that familiarity, ease of use. But long term, we want to incorporate functionality inside of the wallet that really tries to bring a lot into the mobile landscape. So we're actively talking, for example, with like buy-sell services around the world. One of the biggest pieces of feedback we get from people that onboard new users with our wallet is that, okay, well, I've set them up with your wallet, but then they ask the question, how do I buy Bitcoin? And then that starts to delve into, okay, now I've got to have two accounts, one to buy Bitcoin, and then I've got to go through the effort to transfer it into the wallet. So we said, there's no reason why we can't incorporate APIs from services that offer buy-sell right into the wallet without it being Airbitz holding the money. And so we're already incorporating one from a new startup coming out that will allow buy-sell through our wallet, linking a bank account through ACH, and in a few clicks, it automatically transfers the Bitcoin into your wallet. So it's, in a way, an exchange service or a buy-sell service without you having to trust a third party with your keys, and fully integrated. And we're excited to be able to launch that functionality, in a little bit. So things like that. And the nice thing about that is we can onboard these buy-sell services in many countries in short order, versus trying to be a company that offers the hosted wallet buy-sell service in one country, and then dealing with all the regulatory landscape of another, and then dealing with all the regulatory landscape of another, and then another, and another, slowly and slogging through it all. Whereas there are people that are local, they're native, they're in those countries, they're dealing with it, and they know the system. And instead of working with those partnerships and having this global partnership reach and folding that into our app, so that you can just simply say, hey, you need Bitcoin, install this wallet, and you can buy Bitcoin using that same device. And now we also build, as opposed to a single remittance rail, a lot of people are talking about using Bitcoin to do remittance, and they tend to focus on a specific rail. Oh, we're remittance for, Thailand, for the Philippines, for Mexico. Instead, it's, hey, well, if you're in a developed country, install Airbitzs and buy your Bitcoin, and then tell your friend in the developing country to install Airbitzs, and they can sell their Bitcoin. And it doesn't matter where you go to and where you come from. It's not a rail. It's a network. It's a web of internet connectivity. And that still allows a lot of our partners to benefit. So we're not trying to keep everything in this closed ecosystem where Bitcoin isn't actually being transferred. It's simply, staying inside of our ledger. This is, utilizing the blockchain, utilizing decentralization and different partners around the world. So that's what we have as one of our kind of global long-term visions, to connect the world with Bitcoin.
Paul, all right, one last question. And our listeners, they all have their own unique answer to this. But what, in your eyes, why is decentralization important?
It depends on what industry we're talking about. For the sake of Bitcoin and the sake of currencies, it's important for the sake of fault tolerance, anti-fragility. And those, we know that we're in an industry that many people will not want to succeed. It's going to be fought. It's going to be a bit of a slugfest in the battle. And it was with prior currencies, and it's going to be with implementations of this currency. So if we want it to succeed and we want it to be able to survive that battle, I think we need to keep it decentralized, because decentralization is the one thing that offers that level of fault tolerance that can really weather those storms that will be coming up. I'm absolutely confident that that's going to come down the pipe. So if you care about this technology surviving, then it needs to, as much as we possibly can, make it fault tolerant through decentralization, and that's the single most important thing that I can think of. There's a handful of others in that respect, but that's probably the most important in my mind. There's aspects of privacy which are hard to accomplish without decentralization, and the challenge now is, how do we make decentralization familiar and easy for everyone else, because our world hasn't really cared about it for a long time, because we haven't developed a technology that's going to be as disruptive and fought as this one. Like the internet's somewhat decentralized data, but it wasn't. It didn't have the behemoths that would not want it to succeed the way Bitcoin has the behemoths that will not want it to succeed. So, in a long-winded answer, hopefully that answers it in a way that the listeners can resonate with.
That was a splendid answer, Paul. Can you tell our listeners where they can find out about Airbitz and follow you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Paulinator with 2 L's, Paulinator, and then Airbitz with a Z, AirBitz.co, and then on Twitter at Airbitz as well. We've got a Google Plus page, and you just search it; it comes up all over all over the interwebs, so it shouldn't be too hard to find us. You can also find us at a handful of events. I'll be speaking at the Texas Bitcoin Conference later this month, as well as the New York Inside Bitcoins Conference in April. And if we have any other events coming up, I'll be sure to put those on social media and on our webpage. So definitely reach out, ask us questions, and most importantly, give us feedback. We really want to make sure we're building the product that the community wants. We are very excited about the potential of Bitcoin and Airbitzs, and so we have a list, like, let's see if my hands can fit in the screen, this big, that we want to put into our product, or at least improve and add functionality, but at the same time we only have time for like this much, so we want to hear what people want out of it, so we can kind of funnel our efforts into what the community wants.
Well, decentralized listeners, if we believed in marching orders, you would now have them. But thank you so much for joining us, Paul. We really enjoyed the interview, and we love what you're building. Cool. So we look forward to seeing where Airbitz goes over the next few years. Awesome, cool. We look forward to it too. Look forward to hearing what happens with decentralized and keeping this this show as decentralized as possible. It'd be awesome to hear. We'll be doing it. Thanks. Cool. Take care.
Hey everyone, today we're joined by Paul Puey, who is the co-founder and CEO of AirBitz. Thank you very much for joining us today, Paul.
Hey guys, pleasure being on the show. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So talk to us a little bit about AirBitz. What inspired you to sort of get into Bitcoin and ultimately choose to start a Bitcoin wallet company?
Oh, let's see. How much time do you guys have? Well, let's see. Entry into Bitcoin just came actually from me working both in technology about over a decade ago, and then actually transitioning into small business. I'd worked and did everything from running a restaurant, bar, nightclub, and running a climbing gym and doing outdoor guiding, but still always being the technology guy at those companies and seeing the, I was kind of that guy behind the counter getting screwed with chargebacks of credit cards and seeing them connected. So we wanted to deliver both, and I think we've actually delivered both, but people don't see that. So the people that are the true, like, not necessarily the crypto anarchists, but the uber privacy freaks, they see what we've built and it looks like a hosted wallet, and so they think that we're a hosted wallet, even though we give, in many aspects, privacy above and beyond the very kind of engineer-like wallets that are out there, the technical wallets that are out there. We almost surpass them in privacy in some respects. And so the challenge is the communication. Like, yes, here's something that grandma can use, but deliver the decentralized privacy that the other people care about. And so we've had to communicate that very carefully with people and say, actually, no, this is what happens in the wallet. No, actually, this is what happens in the wallet. And then once we get that communication out there, people start to ease the pain points of a Bitcoin user, as a person who actually tried to use Bitcoin from day one.
Yeah, so would it be fair to say then that the Airbitz wallet is differentiated by its user experience? How do you separate yourself from all the other wallets out there?
So there is an aspect of user experience that we have an incredible focus on. So we do take it from a very high level, like the user experience, the UI, fluidity, but at the same time we feel that too many companies or implementations and projects compromise on core Bitcoin fundamentals of decentralization, privacy, autonomy in the mission to accomplish that user experience, where we've taken it and said, no way, we're not going to compromise on that. We want a decentralized wallet. We think that that's what made Bitcoin fundamentally successful to begin with, as opposed to all of the other digital currencies, which in consumer interface of technology being really, really poor and nascent. And then having learned about Bitcoin, instantly got fascinated. It took me about 2 weeks of research to realize that this was it. And from day one, I bought some Bitcoin and tried to use it. And as soon as I tried to use it, I saw, oh my gosh, this is even worse than the current infrastructure for consumer and merchant and people paying each other. And it didn't seem like it was a problem that could not be solved. And seeing the pain points and seeing what we could do based on the technology we had, I said this is a huge opening. And unlike the current ecosystem of payments that was really riddled with a ton of different companies trying to get into space, this one was fairly young and nascent, and so it was a great opportunity to get into the space. And so really it's trying to go for it, and that's what will make wallets and other projects successful going forward within the Bitcoin space, is whether or not they can retain that decentralization, that fault tolerance, and scalability that was key to Bitcoin. So yes, you're right. We are focusing on user experience, but we're trying to deliver good user experience for a decentralized product, which I don't think anyone has really had that focus on before.
So Paul, what kind of growth have you seen in response to Airbitz as a wallet? And do you see any challenges sort of with consumers kind of pitching the benefits of decentralization to them?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that we run into is that people don't realize what we do under the covers. It's almost like our user experience hides a lot of our core values. And that was somewhat intentional, but also, we're realizing that it's more of a challenge than we expected.